My daughter-in-law decided I was too old-fashioned and banned me from my only grandchild's first birthday party. But when they sent out digital invitations to their modern, adults-only celebration, they had no idea that I had already befriended all the neighborhood parents at the local community center where I volunteer. So while they hosted 12 adults for fancy cocktails and cupcakes, I threw a magical children's carnival next door with 20 families, a petting zoo, and enough love to remind everyone what children's birthdays are truly about. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I never imagined I would be excluded from my own grandchild's birthday celebration. At 73, I had envisioned being surrounded by family for these precious milestones, sharing traditions, taking photographs, and creating memories that would outlast me. Instead, I found myself at the center of a modern family drama that tested not only my patience but my understanding of my place in this new generation's world. My name is Margaret Wilson. I raised 3 children in our family home on Oak Ridge Lane in the small town of Pinecrest. My late husband, Charles, and I purchased this house in 1978 when our oldest was just a toddler. It's a spacious colonial with a wraparound porch and a large backyard that has hosted countless birthday parties, graduation celebrations, and family reunions over the decades. Pinecrest was, and still is, the kind of community where neighbors know each other by name, where people still bring casseroles when someone is ill, and where children safely ride bicycles until the streetlights come on. When we first moved here, Charles and I were drawn to this sense of community, believing it was the ideal place to raise a family. We were right. A home is more than just a house, Charles used to say. It's where memories take root and family stories begin. He was right, of course. Every corner of our home holds some precious memory. The height marks on the kitchen door frame tracking our children's growth, the slight dent in the dining room table from when our middle child, Michael, got too enthusiastic with a toy hammer, the oak tree in the backyard planted when our youngest was born. Charles was a high school science teacher, beloved by generations of Pinecrest students for his engaging demonstrations and genuine care for every child who passed through his classroom. I worked as a librarian at the town's public library, a position that allowed me to nurture not only my own children's love of reading, but to become a fixture in the intellectual development of countless young minds in our community. Together, we built a life centered around family, education, and community involvement. Our home became known as a gathering place, a safe haven where neighborhood children could find cookies and conversation after school, where our children's friends were always welcome, and where holiday celebrations grew larger each year as our circle of loved ones expanded. Charles passed away 8 years ago after a brief battle with cancer. Those first months without him were the darkest of my life. After 42 years of marriage, I felt as though half of myself had disappeared. It was our 3 children, James, Michael, and Rebecca, who helped me find my way forward, reminding me that Charles lived on not just in them, but in the community he had helped nurture and the home we had built together. Dad wouldn't want you to stop living, Mom, James told me gently one evening as I sat alone in the darkened living room, surrounded by photo albums. He'd want you to keep being the heart of this family. Those words became my North Star. I gradually resumed hosting Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings, and summer barbecues. Our home remained the gathering place for not just our immediate family, but cousins, neighbors, and friends who had become like family over the years. I joined the community center's board of directors, began volunteering with literacy programs for seniors and children, and even learned how to use social media to keep up with distant relatives and former students who remembered Charles fondly. Mom's house is where the family compass points, James once said during a Thanksgiving toast. No matter where life takes us, we always know where home is. Those words had warmed my heart then. Now they felt like artifacts from a different era. James had settled in Pinecrest with his wife and teenage sons, making them frequent visitors. Rebecca had moved 2 hours away for work, but returned reliably for major holidays and called twice weekly without fail. It was my middle child, Michael, whose life had taken the most dramatic turn. Michael had always been our dreamer, the one with restless intelligence and ambitious plans. After college, he'd moved to the city, earned an MBA, and secured a position at a rapidly growing tech company. While I missed having him nearby, I was proud of his success and the life he was building. During his visits home, he would regale us with stories of startup culture, innovative projects, and the fast pace of city life that seemed so different from our quiet town. 5 years ago, Michael married Amber Mason. They met at the tech company where they both worked, she in marketing, he in product development. Amber was undeniably accomplished, graduated from an elite university, traveled extensively, and possessed the kind of polished confidence that came from moving in sophisticated circles. She was beautiful, articulate, and clearly adored my son. Yet, from the beginning, there was a subtle tension between Amber and me. Nothing dramatic, just different perspectives on family, tradition, and the role of grandparents. Where I saw cherished traditions, she saw outdated conventions. Where I offered experience, she perceived interference. The generational and cultural gap between us felt wider than it had with my other children's partners. Their wedding was my first real glimpse of these differences. When I suggested incorporating some meaningful Wilson family traditions, Charles's father's pocket watch as something old, or the blessing my mother had written for my wedding, Amber politely but firmly declined. Their ceremony was elegant, modern, and highly personalized, but noticeably devoid of family history elements. "It's their day, Mom," Michael reminded me when I expressed disappointment privately. "They want it to reflect who they are as a couple, not where they came from." I tried to understand, to adapt to this new approach to family milestones. After all, times change, and each generation naturally finds its own way. But I couldn't help feeling that something valuable was being lost, the thread of continuity that connects one generation to the next, the shared rituals that give family, life its texture and meaning. After the wedding, Michael and Amber visited Pinecrest occasionally, usually for major holidays. During these visits, I noticed how Amber would subtly distance herself from our family traditions, checking her phone during Charles's favorite Christmas carol, suggesting restaurant dinners rather than home-cooked family meals, politely declining to look at family photo albums or hear stories about Michael's childhood. "Margaret has such charming, old-school ideas," she would say to others at family gatherings, the compliment carrying a slight edge that wasn't lost on me. "It's like visiting a living history museum when we come here." I tried to take it as the compliment she pretended it was, though I knew better. At 73, I wasn't exactly living in the past. I used a smartphone, maintained an active social media presence to keep up with distant relatives, and volunteered teaching computer basics at our community center. But I did value traditions, especially those that connected generations and created continuity in children's lives. When Michael and Amber announced they were expecting, I was overjoyed. My first grandchild. After years of watching James's boys grow and hearing about Rebecca's decision to focus on her career rather than starting a family, I had begun to wonder if I would ever experience the joy of grandparenthood. The news filled me with a sense of purpose and anticipation I hadn't felt since Charles was alive. I immediately began preparing, knitting blankets, researching the latest in baby safety. So much had changed since I'd had my own, and setting up a nursery space in my home for visits. I imagined weekend sleepovers, baking cookies together as the child grew, passing down family stories and traditions. I pictured myself as the kind of grandmother I had been blessed with, a source of unconditional love, wisdom, and connection to family history. "Mom, maybe dial it back a bit," Michael suggested gently after seeing the nursery I'd prepared. "Amber has some specific ideas about how she wants to approach parenting." Of course she does, I assured him. Every mother does. I'm just excited to be part of this journey with you both. What I didn't fully understand then was that being part of the journey would mean something very different than what I had envisioned. Michael and Amber purchased a house just 3 streets away from mine, a decision that filled me with joy and anticipation. They had been living in a downtown condo, and I had worried their urban lifestyle might keep my future grandchild at a distance. Their choice to move to Pinecrest seemed like a beautiful bridge between our different worlds, an opportunity for me to be the involved grandmother I longed to be while respecting their independence. It just makes sense, Michael explained when they announced their decision. Better schools, more space, and you'll be nearby to help when the baby comes. The house they chose was nothing like mine, a sleek modern construction with clean lines, neutral colors, and minimalist decor. No wraparound porch, no well-worn furniture bearing the marks of generations, no walls crowded with family photographs. Instead, their home featured smart technology, ergonomic furniture, and carefully curated art pieces. It was beautiful in its way, though it lacked the lived-in warmth I associated with family homes. Little Emma was born on a beautiful spring morning. She was perfect, a full head of dark hair like her father had had, her mother's delicate features, and what I was certain was her grandfather's determined chin. I was at the hospital within hours, arms laden with gifts and a heart full of love for this tiny new person who connected past to future. Holding Emma for the first time, I felt Charles's absence acutely. How he would have adored this child, this continuation of our family story. I whispered to Emma about her grandfather, his kindness, his laugh, his love of science and nature, promising to make sure she grew up knowing the remarkable man whose genes she carried, even if he couldn't be there to know her. She has his eyes, I said softly to Michael, who stood watching with tears in his own eyes. She does, he agreed, reaching out to touch his daughter's tiny hand. Dad would have been over the moon. It was a perfect moment of connection across generations, bittersweet, profound, and fleeting. The first few months seemed to go well. I visited regularly, though always with advance notice as Amber had requested. I respected their baby schedules and never stayed too long. When I offered advice, I tried to phrase it as, one thing that worked for Michael was, rather than direct suggestions. I was walking a careful line, trying to be present without being intrusive. You're doing wonderfully with Emma, I told Amber during one visit when she seemed particularly tired. Motherhood looks beautiful on you. She had smiled, a genuine moment of connection. Thanks, Margaret. Some days I feel like I'm just making it up as I go along. That's the secret of motherhood, I confided. We're all just figuring it out day by day. No one really knows what they're doing at first. She had laughed then, and I thought perhaps we were turning a corner in our relationship. I was wrong. As Emma grew and began to develop her personality, a curious, bright little thing who loved music and colorful books, the invitations to visit became less frequent. My offers to babysit were politely declined with references to their very specific nap schedule, or the fact that Emma was still adjusting to her routine. When I did visit, I noticed Amber watching me closely when I held Emma, as if waiting for me to do something she disapproved of. Once, when Emma was fussing, I instinctively began to hum the lullaby I had sung to Michael as a baby. Amber immediately intervened. We actually don't do traditional lullabies, she explained, taking Emma from my arms. We use a specific white noise machine that's been scientifically proven to promote optimal sleep patterns. Another time, I brought a small stuffed bear that had been Michael's favorite childhood toy, carefully cleaned and restored. That's so thoughtful, Margaret, Amber said, placing it high on a shelf where Emma couldn't reach it. But we're trying to minimize Emma's exposure to synthetic materials. Her toys are all organic cotton or sustainable wood. Each visit brought some new revelation about their parenting philosophy, one that seemed deliberately designed to exclude traditional grandparenting roles and family connections. No homemade baby food. They used an organic meal delivery service. No traditional bedtime stories. They had an app that generated personalized narratives based on child development stages. No family nicknames. They believed in using proper names to promote linguistic clarity. "She has her way of doing things," Michael explained when I mentioned the growing distance. "You know how it is with new moms. They're protective." I did. No. I had been a new mother myself once, but this felt different. This felt like I was being slowly edged out of my grandchild's life, my role as grandmother being redefined without my input. I tried to adapt, to find my place in this new paradigm of parenthood. I read the parenting books Amber mentioned, researched the child development theories she followed, even attended a workshop on modern grandparenting at the community center. I wanted to understand her perspective, to build bridges between our different approaches to family life. My efforts seemed to make little difference. The invisible wall between us remained, occasionally becoming more visible through Amber's comments at family gatherings. "We're raising Emma to be a global citizen," she would explain to relatives, "not tied to outdated cultural norms or limiting family expectations." The implication that my traditions and values were somehow limiting rather than enriching stung deeply. Still, I held my tongue, believing that patience and understanding would eventually lead to a more balanced relationship. As Emma approached her first birthday, I found myself increasingly excited about this milestone. First birthdays were special. Occasions in our family, not extravagant affairs, but meaningful celebrations that welcomed a child into the circle of family traditions. I had saved the handmade birthday crown that all my children had worn for their first birthdays, a simple felt creation decorated with their names and birth dates. I had recipes for the same simple, honey-sweetened cake I had made for each of my children. I even had photo albums showing 3 generations of first birthday celebrations to share with Emma someday. The real turning point came 3 weeks before Emma's first birthday. I had called Michael to ask about birthday plans, excited, to discuss the small family gathering I had assumed would take place at my home, as all our family celebrations had for decades. "Actually, Mom," Michael said, an uncomfortable note in his voice. "Amber's planning something at our place. Just a small thing." "That's fine," I said, adjusting my expectations. "What can I bring?" "I was thinking of making that vanilla bean cake." "That was always your favorite." "And I found the most darling little dress for Emma." "Mom," he interrupted, "there's something I need to tell you, and it's going to be difficult." My heart sank as he continued, his voice strained. "Amber feels that Emma's first birthday should set the tone for their relationship going forward. She wants to establish certain boundaries." "Boundaries?" I repeated, the word feeling foreign in this context. "What kind of boundaries?" He sighed heavily. "She doesn't want traditional grandma-style celebrations. She's planning a more modern party, adults only actually. No traditional cake or baby games. More of a sophisticated celebration with their friends from the city and a few colleagues." "Adults only?" I echoed, confused. "But it's a first birthday party. Shouldn't it be about the child?" "Emma won't remember it anyway," he said, repeating what I was certain were Amber's words. "This is really more of a we survived the first year celebration for the parents. There'll be craft cocktails, a catered spread from that new fusion restaurant downtown, and a documentary photographer capturing candid moments." I tried to understand, to be flexible. "Well, I'm an adult. When should I arrive?" There was a long, terrible silence before he answered. "Amber thinks it would be best if you sat this one out. She's worried you'll be uncomfortable with the kind of party she's planning, that you might be critical or try to change things to be more traditional." The words hit me like a physical blow. I was being uninvited from my only grandchild's first birthday, excluded from a milestone I had been looking forward to since the day I learned Amber was pregnant. "I see," I managed to say, though my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "And what do you think, Michael?" Another pause. "I think we need to support Amber's vision for this. It's just one party, Mom. We'll have you over the weekend after for a quiet visit." "I would never criticize or try to change Amber's plans," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I understand times change and celebrations change with them. I just want to be there for Emma's special day." "I know, Mom," Michael replied, his voice heavy with what sounded like guilt. "But Amber feels strongly about this. She wants to establish their family traditions in their own way, without influences from the past. Influences from the past. As if family history and traditions were contaminants to be avoided, rather than foundations to build upon. As if I were a relic rather than a living connection to Emma's heritage." "Will James and his family be there?" I asked, suddenly wondering if this exclusion was uniquely mine. "No," Michael admitted. "It's really just their close friends and some work colleagues. No extended family. That provided small comfort. At least I wasn't being singled out. But the pain remained acute. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had hosted dozens of birthday celebrations over the years, including every single one of Michael's, and allowed myself to feel the full weight of this rejection. It wasn't just about a party. It was about my place in my grandchild's life, in my son's life. It was about traditions being discarded, connections being severed. For the first time since Charles had passed, I felt truly alone. The family I had nurtured, the traditions I had maintained, the home that had always been our gathering place, all of it suddenly seemed fragile, as if it could be wiped away by the modern preferences of a daughter-in-law who saw my ways as outdated rather than timeless. I pulled out photo albums, finding pictures of Michael's first birthday. There he sat in his high chair, face smeared with cake, wearing the felt crown I had made, surrounded by grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and neighborhood friends. Charles stood proudly beside him, one hand on the back of the high chair, his face alight with joy. It was a celebration not just of our son, but of our family, our community, our shared journey through the miracle of watching a child grow. What would Emma's memories be? Sophisticated adults sipping craft cocktails while she was tucked away with a babysitter? Photos capturing candid moments that were carefully curated to present a certain image rather than genuine family connections? A celebration of her parents' survival rather than her joyful existence? I allowed myself exactly 1 hour of self-pity. 1 hour to cry, to feel hurt, to wonder where I had gone wrong. Then I dried my tears, straightened my shoulders, and did what I had always done in the face of life's challenges. I began to make a plan. If I couldn't attend Emma's first birthday party, I would find another way to celebrate this precious milestone. Not out of spite or competition, but out of love for my grandchild and respect for myself. I would create something meaningful, something that honored the importance of this day, without directly challenging Amber's boundaries. What I didn't know then was that this plan would evolve into something far bigger and more impactful than I had initially imagined. Something that would not only redefine my relationship with my son and his family, but would create ripples throughout our community and teach me unexpected lessons about adaptation, dignity, and the true meaning of family in modern times. Theo, seeds of what the town would later call the birthday that wasn't, were planted in that moment of hurt and resolution. And like all the best gardens, something I knew quite a bit about, what would grow from those seeds would be more beautiful and abundant than anyone could have predicted. The morning after my devastating phone call with Michael, I woke up with swollen eyes but renewed purpose. Years of life's challenges had taught me that dwelling on hurt accomplishes nothing. Action is the only true antidote to heartache. As I went through my morning rituals, brewing the strong black tea Charles had preferred over coffee, tending to the herb garden outside my kitchen window, making the bed with hospital corners exactly as my mother had taught me, I allowed my mind to work through possibilities. What mattered most wasn't being at the party Amber was planning. What mattered was honoring Emma's milestone in a meaningful way that respected my role as her grandmother while acknowledging the boundaries her parents had established. I needed to find a middle path, one that preserved my dignity without escalating tensions. "What would you do, Charles?" I asked aloud, a habit I'd developed in the years since his passing. Speaking to him helped clarify my thoughts, as if his wise, measured perspective continued to guide me even in absence. I could almost hear his thoughtful reply. "Remember what matters most, Maggie. It's not about being right, it's about being connected." Connection. That was the heart of the issue. Amber was severing a connection between Emma and her family history, between Emma and traditional celebrations centered on childish joy rather than adult sophistication, and most painfully between Emma and me. Whatever I decided to do needed to be about restoring those connections, not further damaging them. I couldn't change Amber's party or her decision to exclude me. But perhaps I could create something parallel, a celebration that honored Emma, in a different way, without directly competing with or challenging the event her parents had planned. As I pondered this, the doorbell rang, a welcome interruption to my circular thoughts. On my porch stood Eleanor Hayes, my neighbor from 3 doors down and a fellow volunteer at the Pinecrest Community Center. "I brought those garden magazines I promised," she announced, holding up a stack of glossy publications. "The one on top has that article about drought-resistant perennials we were discussing." Eleanor was in her late 60s, a retired elementary school principal with boundless energy and a knack for organizing everything from school fundraisers to neighborhood watch programs. We had become friends through our shared love of gardening and our volunteer work at the community center, where we both taught classes. She focused on early childhood literacy, while I handled computer basics for seniors. "Perfect timing," I said, ushering her in. "I just made tea, and I could use the company." In my sunny kitchen, as we leafed through gardening magazines and discussed the merits of various mulching techniques, I found myself unburdening my heart about the birthday situation. Eleanor listened without interruption, her expression shifting from surprise to indignation as I recounted Michael's awkward phone call. "Adults only?" she echoed when I finished. "For a first birthday? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Whose milestone are they even celebrating?" "Theirs, apparently," I sighed. "Amber sees it as a 'we survived the first-year party' more than Emma's celebration." Eleanor snorted. "I've been an educator for 40 years, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, first birthdays are for the children, even if they won't remember them. They're about establishing a child's place in the family, creating traditions, capturing memories for them to enjoy later." Her righteous indignation was comforting, but I needed solutions more than validation. "I know, but I can't change their minds, and I don't want to make this into a bigger conflict. I'm trying to figure out a way to honor Emma's birthday that doesn't step on Amber's toes, but still allows me to celebrate my only grandchild." Eleanor studied me thoughtfully, tapping her fingers on the table, a habit from her principal days when she was working through a disciplinary issue. "You know, this reminds me of a situation we had at school years ago. Parents divorced, couldn't stand to be in the same room, but both wanted to attend their child's graduation. We ended up creating 2 small ceremonies instead of forcing a confrontation." "2 ceremonies," I repeated, something clicking into place. "That's interesting." "Margaret," Eleanor said suddenly, sitting up straighter. "What about the community center? You could host a children's birthday event there. Not specifically labeled as Emma's party, but a spring birthday celebration for all the neighborhood children born in April and May. It would be appropriate for you to organize as a community, volunteer Emma could attend if Michael and Amber chose to bring her, and other children would benefit too. The idea resonated immediately. The Pinecrest Community Center had been a cornerstone of local life for decades, offering everything from senior bingo nights to teen mentoring programs. Charles and I had been involved since our children were small, he running the science club. For middle schoolers, me organizing the annual book fair. Since his passing, I'd increased my involvement, finding purpose in community service that filled some of the emptiness his absence had left. "That could work," I said slowly, the possibilities expanding in my mind. I could frame it as a community event, open to all families with young children. No pressure on Michael and Amber to attend, but the option would be there. Exactly. Eleanor nodded enthusiastically. You'd be giving to the community while also creating a space where Emma could be celebrated appropriately, with other children, games, and actual birthday cake. We spent the next hour outlining what such an event might entail: age-appropriate activities, reasonable costs, potential volunteers. By the time Eleanor left, the heaviness in my heart had lifted considerably. I had a direction now, a positive channel for my hurt and disappointment. The next morning, I headed to the community center for my regular Tuesday volunteer shift. The center occupied a renovated Victorian mansion donated to the town decades earlier by the Harrington family, Pinecrest's founding residents. Its grand rooms now served as classrooms, meeting spaces, and activity areas, while the sprawling grounds hosted everything from summer picnics to outdoor movie nights. Director Sofia Martinez greeted me warmly as I entered. In her early 50s, with prematurely silver hair and seemingly boundless energy, Sofia had transformed the center from a sleepy gathering place for seniors into a vibrant hub for all ages during her 10-year tenure. "Margaret, just the person I wanted to see," she called, motioning me into her office. A cozy space filled with community awards, children's artwork, and family photos. "I've been thinking about our spring calendar. We have that empty weekend after Easter, and I wondered if you had any ideas for family programming." The coincidence was too perfect to ignore. That empty weekend was, in fact, the same weekend as Emma's birthday. Taking a deep breath, I outlined the concept Eleanor and I had discussed: a spring birthday celebration for children born in April and May, with games, storytelling, and simple refreshments. It wouldn't be elaborate, I explained. Just a few hours on Saturday afternoon. We could invite families from the neighborhood, perhaps the children from your early literacy program and my grandson Tommy's playgroup. A community celebration, rather than individual parties, which can be so expensive and stressful for young parents. Sophia's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. We've never done anything like that before, but it addresses a real need. Not every family can afford elaborate birthday parties, but every child deserves to be celebrated." She tapped a few notes into her computer. "Budget would be minimal. We could use the craft supplies we already have. The large room is available that Saturday, and I'm sure we could find volunteers to help." "I'd be happy to coordinate," I offered, trying to keep my voice casual despite my growing excitement. "I have plenty of experience with children's parties, and it would give me a meaningful project to focus on." "Are you sure?" Sophia asked. "It could be a lot of work organizing activities for multiple age groups." "I'm sure," I said firmly. In fact, I've already been thinking about possible themes and activities. By the time I left Sophia's office, the event was officially on the center's calendar. Spring birthday celebration, honoring our littlest community members. I had committed to chairing the planning committee, developing activities for children ages 1 to 5, and coordinating volunteers. Sophia would handle the formal announcements and facility arrangements. Over the next 2 weeks, the project took shape with unexpected momentum. When I mentioned it during my senior computer class, 3 of my students immediately volunteered to help. One offering to photograph the event, another to bake cookies, and a third to create digital invitations. At Eleanor's early literacy program, Several mothers expressed enthusiasm, offering to bring fruit platters and help with setup. Word spread through Pinecrest's active community networks, and soon the modest gathering I had envisioned began to transform into something more substantial. The local bakery owner, whose granddaughter attended the center's preschool program, offered to donate a sheet cake. A retired clown who had moved to Pinecrest the previous year volunteered his services, including balloon animals and simple magic tricks. The high school drama club proposed a short puppet show featuring classic children's stories. What touched me most deeply were the offers from parents of young children, the very demographic Amber and Michael counted themselves among. Modern parents with busy schedules and contemporary views, yet who still valued community celebrations and intergenerational connections. They didn't see traditional elements like birthday cake and party games as outdated. They saw them as meaningful, rituals that deserved preservation alongside newer traditions. "My daughter's birthday is in July, but we'd love to come support this," said Lindsay, a young mother in her 30s who brought her toddler to Eleanor's reading circle. "Birthday parties have gotten so competitive and expensive. Something simple and community-focused sounds refreshing." Lindsay's words crystallized something I had been feeling but couldn't articulate. Perhaps part of Amber's rejection of traditional celebrations stemmed not from disdain for the past, but from pressure to perform parenthood perfectly in the present. The elaborately themed parties shared on social media, the professional photographers documenting milestone moments, the catered affairs that cost more than our entire household budget for a month when my children were small, all created an expectation that ordinary family celebrations weren't special enough. This insight softened my feelings toward Amber somewhat. Perhaps her sophisticated adult party wasn't merely a rejection of family tradition, but an attempt to meet the impossible standards modern parents faced. Understanding this didn't erase the hurt of being excluded, but it helped me approach the community celebration with clearer purpose, not as competition or critique, but as an alternative that embraced simplicity and genuine connection. As planning progressed, I deliberately kept Michael and Amber out of my thoughts. This event wasn't about them or even specifically about Emma anymore. It had evolved into something larger, a celebration of childhood, community, and the joy of simple pleasures. If they chose to attend with Emma, they would be welcomed like any other family. If not, the event would still serve its purpose for the many children and families who had enthusiastically embraced the concept. 3 days before the community celebration, and 4 days before Emma's official birthday party, I received an unexpected phone call from James, my oldest son. "So, Mom," he began without preamble, "I hear you're throwing a counter birthday for Emma at the community center." My heart sank. Somehow my carefully constructed narrative had been twisted into exactly what I had tried to avoid: a competitive gesture, a grandmother overstepping boundaries. "That's not accurate at all," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite the hurt and frustration bubbling up. "The community center is hosting a spring celebration for all children with April and May birthdays. I'm helping to organize it as part of my volunteer work there. It has nothing specifically to do with Emma." "That's not how Amber sees it," James said carefully. "Michael called me pretty upset. Apparently some friends from their neighborhood mentioned getting invitations to your alternative celebration the day before Emma's actual party. Amber feels like you're trying to upstage them." I closed my eyes, trying to process how my attempt at finding a positive solution had backfired so dramatically. The invitations went to families involved with the community center programs, which includes some people from their neighborhood. The date was based on the center's availability, not to conflict with their plans. "This isn't about competing with them, James." "I believe you, Mom," he said gently, "but you have to understand how it looks from their perspective. You weren't invited to their party, and now suddenly there's a children's celebration that happens to fall the day before Emma's birthday, organized by her grandmother, taking place practically in their backyard. Put that way, I could see why they might have drawn the wrong conclusion. The community center was indeed just 2 blocks from Michael and Amber's home, and while I hadn't specifically invited their friends, the digital announcements had gone to families involved with various center programs, which naturally included many young parents from their neighborhood. "What should I do?" I asked, genuinely seeking his advice. Cancel an event that dozens of children are now looking forward to? An event that was never intended to cause conflict? James was silent for a moment. "No," he finally said. "Canceling would disappoint too many people and probably wouldn't mend fences anyway. But maybe reach out to Michael directly. Explain the situation honestly. Invite them personally. Make it clear this isn't about undermining their celebration, but about creating something positive for the community." It was sound advice. After our call ended, I sat with my thoughts for nearly an hour before picking up the phone to call Michael. When his voicemail answered, I left what I hoped was a clear, genuine message. "Michael, it's Mom. I understand there may be some misunderstanding about the community center event this Saturday. This was planned as part of my volunteer work there, not as any kind of alternative to Emma's birthday celebration. Many families with young children will be attending to celebrate spring birthdays together. You, Amber, and Emma would be very welcome, but please don't feel any pressure or obligation. I respect your plans for Sunday and look forward to seeing Emma whenever you feel comfortable. Love you." He didn't call back, which wasn't entirely surprising. Ball in their court, as Charles would have said. The morning of the spring birthday, celebration arrived bright and clear, perfect weather for the outdoor activities we had planned in addition to the indoor stations. I arrived at the community center 3 hours early, my car loaded with decorations, craft supplies, and the child-sized table and chairs I had saved from my own children's early years. The transformation of the center's main hall exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Colorful streamers hung from the ceiling, creating a festive canopy above activity stations arranged around the perimeter. Volunteers had set up a face-painting corner, a storytelling nook with comfortable floor cushions, a craft table for making simple musical instruments, and a sensory play area with bins of colored rice, water beads, and Play-Doh. In the center of the room stood what we had come to call the birthday circle, a ring of small chairs surrounding a larger floor mat where children celebrating April and May birthdays would be recognized with a special song and presented with flower crowns crafted by the Senior Gardening Club. Not traditional birthday crowns like the one I had saved for Emma, but something similar in spirit. A token that said, "You matter, you are special, your life is worth celebrating." Outside, the center's sprawling lawn had been set up with bubble stations, a small petting area featuring rabbits and guinea pigs from the high school's agriculture program, and a simple obstacle course made from pool noodles, hula hoops, and colorful cones. Nothing elaborate or expensive, but magical in the eyes of young children. By 1 o'clock, a half hour before the official start time, families had already begun to arrive. Parents and grandparents with excited children, volunteers putting final touches on their stations, community members who had simply heard about the event and wanted to support it. The energy was palpable, a buzzing anticipation that reminded me of the best family gatherings from my own children's youth. Eleanor found me adjusting the refreshment table, where homemade cookies sat alongside fruit platters, cheese cubes, and small cups of goldfish crackers, simple, child-friendly fare that wouldn't compete with anyone's official birthday cake. "This is amazing, Margaret," she said, gesturing around the transformed space. "You've created something truly special here. I've already counted at least 15 children who will be celebrated in the birthday circle." "We've created," I corrected her. "This has been a community effort from the start." "Yes, but it was your vision," she insisted. "Your ability to turn disappointment into something positive for everyone." As we spoke, more families continued to stream in, far more than the 30 or so we had expected based on RSVPs. Word had spread beyond our initial invitations, drawing curious neighbors and friends of friends. By 2 o'clock, when Sophia officially welcomed everyone, Nearly 75 people filled the center's main room and spilled onto the lawn outside. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. I moved from station to station, helping volunteers, chatting with parents, and watching children's faces light up with each new experience. The puppet show elicited peals of laughter. The bubble station created moments of wide-eyed wonder, and the birthday circle recognition brought proud smiles to little faces unaccustomed to being the center of attention. I was so absorbed in helping. A 3-year-old created a shaker instrument at the craft table that I didn't immediately notice the new arrivals standing uncertainly at the entrance. When I looked up, my heart jumped. Michael, holding Emma in his arms, scanning the room with an unreadable expression. Beside him stood not Amber, as I might have expected, but James and his wife Kate, apparently serving as buffers or moral support. Our eyes met across the crowded room. I offered a small, hopeful smile but made no move toward them, giving Michael space to determine the nature of this encounter. After a moment's hesitation, he made his way through the throng of children and parents, stopping a few feet from where I stood. "This is quite an event," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "James thought we should see what it was all about." "I'm glad you came," I replied simply, focusing my attention on Emma, who was taking in the colorful surroundings with wide-eyed curiosity. "Hello, sweet girl. Do you want to make some music with us?" Emma reached toward the table of craft materials, clearly intrigued by the colorful feathers and ribbons used to decorate the homemade instruments. Michael hesitated, then set her down in the small chair beside me. "Is that okay?" he asked, suddenly seeming younger, more like the son I had raised than the distant adult he had become. "Can you watch her while I talk to James for a minute?" "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the surge of emotion. This small act, entrusting Emma to my care, even briefly, felt significant after months of carefully supervised visits and declined babysitting offers. As Michael stepped away, Emma and I entered our own little world. I showed her how to fill a small plastic container with beans to create a sound shaker, helping her tiny hands secure the lid and attach colorful ribbons. She concentrated intensely, her little forehead furrowed in an expression so reminiscent of Michael at that age that my heart constricted momentarily. "That's it," I encouraged as she shook the completed instrument, delighting in the rattling sound. "You're making music, Emma." She smiled up at me, a full, uninhibited smile of shared joy, and in that moment, all the hurt and disappointment of the past week seemed to recede. This was what mattered, this connection, this transfer of knowledge and experience across generations, this simple pleasure of creating something together. Michael returned as we were putting the finishing touches on Emma's instrument, a second adult in tow, not James as I expected, but Amber, her expression a complex mixture of curiosity and discomfort. "Amber," I greeted her, genuine surprise in my voice. "I didn't realize you were here too." "I was dropping some things off at the house when James and Michael were leaving," she explained, her gaze taking in the bustling activity around us. It seemed important to see what was happening here. There was an undercurrent to her words I couldn't quite decipher. Not hostility exactly, but perhaps a reluctant acknowledgement that what she found wasn't what she had expected. The event clearly wasn't the direct competition she had feared. Not a grandmother's spiteful alternative, but a genuine community celebration that happened to include her daughter among many others. "Emma's having a wonderful time," I said, focusing on neutral ground. "She has quite an ear for music." Amber watched as Emma shook her handmade instrument with increasing enthusiasm. "She loves music at home too. We have a playlist of classical compositions that supposedly boost cognitive development." I nodded, resisting the urge to mention the simple lullabies and folk songs that had soothed generations of children long before curated playlists existed. Children respond to rhythm and melody from such an early age. It's remarkable to watch. Slightly awkward silence fell between us, filled with the happy chaos of children playing nearby. I was searching for another neutral topic when Eleanor appeared at my elbow. "Margaret, we're ready for the birthday circle in 5 minutes. Should I include Emma or—" She trailed off, suddenly aware of the delicate situation. Before I could answer, Michael stepped forward. "Birthday circle? It's a special recognition. For children with April and May birthdays," I explained carefully. "Just a simple song and a flower crown made by the Senior Gardening Club. Nothing elaborate, but a moment to be celebrated by the community." Michael and Amber exchanged a look I couldn't interpret, some private communication passing between them as parents. After a moment, Amber gave a small nod. "She can participate," Michael decided. "If that's okay with you, Mom?" The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Was it okay for Emma to be publicly celebrated as part of this community event, the day before her parents' separate celebration? Was it okay to acknowledge her connection to me, to traditions different from those Amber was establishing? "I would be honored," I said simply, my eyes meeting Michael's with perfect understanding. 10 minutes later, Emma sat among 14 other children in the birthday circle. Her eyes wide as volunteers led everyone in a simple birthday song. When her name was called along with her upcoming birthday, she bounced excitedly in her little chair. I watched from a respectful distance as one of the Senior Gardening Club members placed a delicate crown of spring flowers on her dark curls, carefully adjusted by Michael kneeling beside her. The moment was perfect in its simplicity. No expensive decorations, no carefully curated photo opportunities, just a child being recognized and celebrated by a community that valued her presence. Other parents snapped photos, community elders beamed with pride at their little ones, and children glowed with the special happiness that comes from being the center of attention for just the right amount of time. I caught Amber watching the proceedings with an expression I hadn't seen before, a softness, a thoughtfulness, perhaps even a recognition that there was value in this type of celebration that her sophisticated, adults-only event might not capture. She wasn't transformed, suddenly embracing all the traditions she had previously rejected, but there was an opening, a tiny crack in the wall she had built between Emma and the community-centered childhood Michael had experienced. As the formal celebration concluded and families began to drift toward the refreshment table or back to activity stations, Michael approached me, Emma still wearing her flower crown in his arms. "This isn't what I expected," he admitted quietly. "What did you expect?" I asked. He shrugged slightly. "Something competitive. A statement about Amber's party being wrong. A grandmother staking her claim." "That was never my intention," I told him honestly. This started as a way to channel my disappointment into something positive, yes, but it evolved into something that serves a real need in our community. A celebration that's accessible to everyone, that brings generations together, that honors children in a simple, meaningful way. Michael was silent for a moment, bouncing Emma gently as she began to show signs of tiredness after all the excitement. "I understand better now," he finally said, "and I think there's room for both kinds of celebrations in Emma's life. The modern and the traditional, the sophisticated and the simple." It wasn't an apology for excluding me from Sunday's party, nor a promise that things would fundamentally change, but it was an acknowledgement, a recognition that what I offered had value, that my approach to family and celebration deserved respect alongside their new traditions. As they prepared to leave, Emma heavy-lidded in Michael's arms, Amber approached me directly. "The party tomorrow is still adults only," she said, her tone matter-of-fact rather than apologetic. "But we'd like you to come for lunch next weekend. Just the 4 of us. Emma keeps asking for Gamma in her own way, and I think more regular visits would be good for her." The olive branch was small but significant. Not everything I wanted, but a starting point for rebuilding the connection I feared had been permanently damaged. "I'd like that very much," I replied simply. After they left, I rejoined the celebration, helping clean up spilled juice, admiring crayon masterpieces, and listening to elderly volunteers share stories with young parents about how birthdays were celebrated in their day. The event continued for another hour, families reluctantly departing only when children began to show signs of overstimulation and tiredness. As I helped volunteers dismantle activity stations and pack up leftover refreshments, Sophia appeared at my side, her expression thoughtful. "We need to make this an annual tradition," she declared. "I've never seen such a perfect bridging of generations, such genuine community engagement. Parents are already asking if we'll do summer birthdays next." "It would be wonderful to continue," I agreed, surveying the now empty birthday circle with satisfaction. There's something powerful about celebrating children together, about making each one feel special without the pressure of elaborate individual parties. And something powerful about honoring traditions while creating new ones, Sophia added, giving me a knowing look. "I saw your family here today. That seemed significant." I smiled, not bothering to explain the complicated backstory. It was significant. A beginning, I think. Later that evening, as I sat on my porch watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk, my phone chimed with a text message from Michael, a rare occurrence in our typically phone call-oriented communication. When I opened it, I found a photo of Emma, still wearing her slightly crooked flower crown, fast asleep in her car seat on their drive home. The caption read simply, "Thank you for today. She had a wonderful time." It wasn't everything I had hoped for. Emma's official birthday celebration would still take place without me, with craft cocktails instead of cupcakes, sophisticated conversation instead of children's laughter. The tension with Amber wasn't resolved. The differences in our approaches to family and tradition not erased by one community event. Yet something fundamental had shifted. A door previously closing had opened just slightly, a recognition that there might be value in multiple approaches, in blending old and new, in finding ways for Emma to experience both the modern world her parents inhabited and the timeless traditions I represented. As I looked at the sleeping face of my granddaughter, flower petals already beginning to wilt in her dark curls, I felt a profound sense of peace. The spring birthday celebration hadn't been conceived as competition or revenge, though hurt feelings had certainly played a role in its inception. Instead, it had evolved into something far more meaningful, a genuine community gathering that served dozens of families, a bridge between generations, and unexpectedly a potential path forward for my relationship with Emma and her parents. Sometimes, I reflected, the greatest victories come not from direct confrontation, but from creative alternatives that make space for everyone's needs. Not from proving others wrong, but from demonstrating a different kind of right. Not from clinging rigidly to how things have always been done, but from adapting traditions to serve present needs while honoring their essential purpose. Charles would have approved. Flexibility without surrender, he used to tell our children when teaching them to stand firm on important principles while compromising on details. Bend like a reed in the wind, but keep your roots firmly planted. Tomorrow, Emma would have her sophisticated, adults-only celebration, and that was her parents' right to provide. But today, she had experienced something equally valuable, a community that celebrated her simply for existing, traditions that connected her to something larger than herself, and a grandmother who had found a way to honor her milestone with dignity, creativity, and love. In the growing darkness of my porch, fireflies dancing like birthday candles across the lawn, I smiled at the unexpected lesson of it all. Sometimes the most powerful response to exclusion isn't fighting for inclusion, but creating something new altogether, something that serves not just your own needs but the needs of an entire community, something that transforms personal hurt into collective joy. The birthday that wasn't had become the celebration that was, different from what I had initially imagined, but perhaps more meaningful in the end. The morning after the spring birthday. Celebration. I woke early, my mind already busy with conflicting emotions. The community event had exceeded all expectations. Children delighted, parents grateful, generations connected in meaningful ways. Emma's participation and Michael's tentative olive branch had soothed some of my deepest hurts. Yet today was Emma's official first birthday, a milestone celebration from which I remained excluded. As I prepared my morning tea, I found myself wondering about the sophisticated party Amber had planned. Would Emma be present throughout, or tucked away with a sitter after making a brief appearance? Would there be any elements that centered on her joy rather than adult entertainment? Would Michael think of me at all, remembering how I had created special moments for each of his birthdays throughout childhood? "Stop this," I said aloud to myself, Charles's practical voice echoing in my head. "Today isn't about you." He was right, of course. Today was Emma's day, however her parents chose to celebrate it. My feelings about their choices were secondary to the simple fact that my granddaughter was turning 1. A miracle of growth and development worth celebrating regardless of the form that celebration took. With that perspective firmly in mind, I turned my attention to the small gift and card I had prepared for Emma. I had decided against sending anything elaborate that might be perceived as a statement or criticism. Instead, I'd chosen a simple silver frame, elegantly engraved with Emma's first birthday, containing a photograph of 4 generations of women in our family. My mother holding me as a baby, me holding Michael, and a space left for a photo of Amber holding Emma that I hoped they might add. The accompanying card expressed simple birthday wishes without reference to not attending the celebration. I had even drafted and discarded several versions before settling on words that conveyed love without judgment or passive-aggressive undertones. The question was how to deliver it. Bringing it to their house today seemed intrusive, potentially casting a shadow over their planned celebration. Waiting until the lunch Amber had mentioned next weekend felt too distant, as if I were deliberately ignoring the actual birthday. After consideration, I decided on a middle path. I would drop it off at their front door early, with no expectation of being invited in or acknowledged. A quiet recognition of the day, without inserting myself into their plans. At 7:30, I drove the 3 blocks to Michael and Amber's modern home, gift bag in hand. Their house stood quiet in the early morning light, no signs yet of birthday preparations or activity. I approached the front door feeling slightly self-conscious, aware that neighbors might wonder about the older woman leaving a package and hurrying away. Just as I set the gift bag gently against the door, planning a quick retreat to my car, the door swung open. Michael stood there in pajama pants and a faded university t-shirt, hair rumpled, clearly just awakened. Emma peered around his legs in footed pajamas, her early riser habits apparently matching mine rather than her parents'. "Mom," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "What are you doing here so early?" "I just wanted to drop this off for Emma's birthday," I explained, lifting the small gift bag. "I didn't expect anyone to be awake yet. I wasn't planning to interrupt." "Gamma," Emma exclaimed, using her newly established name for me as she toddled forward unsteadily. The simple recognition melted something in my heart. She knew me, remembered me, was happy to see me despite the limited time we'd spent together in recent months. All the tension with Amber couldn't erase that fundamental connection between grandmother and grandchild. Michael hesitated, glancing back into the house before making a decision. "Why don't you come in for coffee? Amber's still asleep and I was just about to make breakfast for this early bird." The invitation surprised me. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose, especially today." "It's fine," he assured me, stepping back to allow me entry. "Actually, I've been wanting to talk to you since yesterday." I followed him into their sleek minimalist kitchen, all stainless steel appliances, white quartz countertops, and carefully organized open shelving displaying matching dishes and glassware. So different from my cozy, slightly cluttered kitchen with its mismatched mugs and well-worn wooden cutting boards, each telling a story of family meals and holiday gatherings over decades. As Michael prepared coffee in an elaborate machine that hissed and gurgled impressively, I settled at the kitchen island with Emma, who immediately began showing me her toy giraffe with tremendous seriousness, explaining its features in the half-formed language of a 1-year-old. She's remarkably verbal for her age, I observed, genuinely impressed by how she combined recognizable words with expressive gestures to communicate. The pediatrician says she's advanced in language development. Michael nodded, obvious pride in his voice. Amber has been using some special language acquisition techniques with her, lots of descriptive vocabulary, reading advanced picture books, that sort of thing. Your sister Rebecca was the same way, I reminisced. Complete sentences by 18 months. You were more physical, walking early, climbing everything in sight. Each child develops on their own timeline. Michael set a mug of coffee before me, then turned to prepare Emma's breakfast, a precisely measured portion of organic yogurt with fresh berries and granola. As he worked, a thoughtful expression crossed his face. Yesterday got me thinking, he began, measuring his words carefully. About traditions and why they matter. About different ways of celebrating milestones. I waited, giving him space to gather his thoughts. Growing up, I took for granted that birthdays meant homemade cake, family gatherings, silly games, and lots of laughter, he continued, placing Emma's breakfast before her. That was just what birthdays were, but Amber's experience was completely different. Her parents treated birthdays as networking opportunities, formal events, performances for family friends rather than actual celebrations. This was new information. In 5 years of knowing Amber, I had never learned much about her childhood or family traditions. She rarely spoke of her parents, who lived across the country and visited infrequently, and I had carefully avoided asking questions that might seem intrusive. I didn't realize, I said gently. That must have been difficult for her as a child. Michael nodded. She doesn't have a single memory of a birthday that was actually about her joy or preferences. Everything was selected to impress guests, the venue, the food, the activities. Even her gifts were often things that photographed well but weren't what she actually wanted. A wave of compassion washed over me. Suddenly, Amber's insistence on a sophisticated, adults-only celebration took on new dimensions. She wasn't simply rejecting family traditions. She was repeating the only birthday pattern she knew, perhaps even trying to reclaim and perfect it. When we met, Michael continued, one of the things that drew her to our family was how different our celebrations were from her experience, how genuine and warm. But when it came to planning Emma's birthday, she reverted to what felt normal, to her. Planning the kind of event her parents would approve of, that would photograph well for her friends and colleagues. And my expectations felt like pressure, I surmised, understanding dawning. Like criticism of her way of doing things rather than simply a different tradition. Exactly, Michael confirmed. The more you talked about traditional family celebrations, the more determined she became to establish something different. It became this symbolic battleground. Emma, finished with her breakfast, wiggled down from her booster seat and toddled off to retrieve a book from the living room, leaving us in a moment of adult conversation. I should have been more sensitive to that possibility, I acknowledged, more aware that her resistance might come from her own experiences rather than simple rejection of tradition. Michael sipped his coffee thoughtfully. And I should have better explained to both of you where the other was coming from, instead of trying to keep the peace by avoiding the conversation entirely. A comfortable silence fell between us, the kind of thoughtful pause that had characterized our relationship before tensions arose around Emma's birth. For the first time in months, I felt like I was talking to my son rather than navigating a diplomatic minefield. So, about today, Michael ventured after a moment. The party is still happening as Amber planned. It's important to her to create this particular experience, and she's put tremendous effort into the details. I understand, I assured him, meaning it more genuinely than I would have before our conversation. Every parent deserves to celebrate their child in ways that feel meaningful to them. But, he continued, I talked with Amber last night after we got home from your community celebration. She agreed that Emma should have something more child-centered as well. So next weekend, when you come for lunch, we thought we might have a small family birthday moment, just the four of us. Nothing elaborate, but a chance for Emma to have cake and open your gift properly. This unexpected compromise brought a lump to my throat. I would love that, I managed to say. It was seeing her at the birthday circle that changed something for Amber, Michael explained. Seeing how happy Emma was being celebrated that way, even though she won't remember the details, she realized maybe there's room for both kinds of celebrations in Emma's life. Before I could respond, we heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Moments later, Amber appeared in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in an elegant silk robe, her expression shifting from sleepy to surprised as she registered my presence. Margaret, she said, self-consciously touching her uncombed hair. I didn't realize you were coming by this morning. I just stopped by to drop off a small gift for Emma, I explained quickly. Michael invited me in for coffee when he saw me at the door. I wasn't planning to stay long. An awkward silence threatened to descend, the ease of conversation with Michael evaporating in Amber's presence. But to my surprise, she moved forward and took a seat at the island beside me. Actually, I'm glad you're here, she said, her voice containing none of the defensive edge I had come to expect. I wanted to thank you for including us yesterday. The community celebration was not what I expected. In a good way, I hope, I ventured. She nodded, accepting the coffee Michael placed before her. I've been thinking a lot about birthdays, about what they're supposed to be. Growing up, my birthdays were always about my parents impressing their friends, showing off our house, our clothes, their successful parenting. I never had a celebration that was actually about me being happy. Her words echoed what Michael had just shared, but hearing them directly from her carried different weight. This wasn't my son interpreting his wife's experiences. This was Amber herself opening a door into her past. That sounds lonely, I said simply, offering understanding without judgment. It was, she acknowledged. And when I got pregnant with Emma, I swore I would do things differently. But somehow, when it came time to plan her first birthday, I found myself recreating the exact pattern I had resented, planning an adult-centered event that was more about presentation than joy. First-time parenting involves a lot of unexpected emotional landmines, I offered. We all carry patterns from our own childhoods, both the ones we want to repeat and the ones we desperately want to avoid. Amber studied me with new consideration, perhaps seeing beyond the traditional grandmother stereotype she had assigned me. Michael has been telling me more about the birthdays you created for him and his siblings. They sound wonderful, focused on the children's happiness rather than adult convenience or appearances. That was always my priority, I confirmed. Though I certainly made plenty of mistakes along the way. Parenting is an imperfect art at best. Emma toddled back into the kitchen, clutching a colorful board book that she thrust toward Amber with an imperious read that made all three adults smile. In a little bit, sweetie, Amber promised, smoothing her daughter's wild morning curls. We need to start getting ready for your party soon. Emma's attention had already shifted to the small gift bag I had brought, her curiosity piqued by the colorful tissue paper peeking out the top. Would you like me to open this with her now? Amber asked, surprising me with the inclusive gesture. Or would you prefer to save it for next weekend when we have our family celebration? The question contained multitudes, acknowledgement of my place in Emma's life, confirmation of the promised family gathering, recognition that my gift deserved proper attention rather than being lost among the many presents she would likely receive today. Next weekend would be perfect, I replied, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness behind her question. Today should be about the celebration you've planned. Amber nodded, then hesitated before asking, would you like to see what we've set up for today? Michael mentioned you dropped by early to avoid interfering. But since you're here, maybe you'd like a peek at the preparations? The invitation felt momentous, a deliberate inclusion, however small, in the day I had been explicitly excluded from just weeks earlier. I'd love that, I said simply. Amber led me through their pristine living room to the back of the house, where glass doors opened onto a beautifully landscaped patio. The space had been transformed with elegant decorations in a sophisticated color palette of sage green, gold, and cream. A long table was set with what appeared to be actual linen napkins and real glassware, small floral arrangements spaced precisely down its center. A bar cart stood ready for the craft cocktails Michael had mentioned, while caterers' trays awaited the food delivery. It was objectively beautiful, tasteful, cohesive, clearly planned with tremendous care. Not at all the kind of celebration I would have created, with its primary colors, balloons, and child-centered activities, but a legitimate expression of celebration nonetheless. It's lovely, Amber, I said with complete sincerity. You've created something really beautiful here. She relaxed slightly at my genuine admiration. It's probably not what you would have done. No, I agreed honestly, but that doesn't make it any less valid or meaningful. Every generation finds their own way to mark important moments. We stood there together, the older woman who had raised 3 children with birthday traditions passed down through generations, and the younger woman creating her own path with different priorities and aesthetics. Not enemies or competitors, as I had feared we had become, but 2 women who loved the same child, each bringing different gifts to her life. I should go and let you prepare for your guests, I said after a moment, aware that the morning was advancing and they likely had much to do before their afternoon gathering. As we walked back through the house, Emma trailing behind us with the book she still hoped someone would read, Amber paused in the living room, seeming to wrestle with something unsaid. Margaret, she finally ventured, I owe you an apology. Excluding you from today it was more about my issues than anything. You did. My complicated feelings about my own parents, my anxiety about living up to expectations, my fear of being judged for not doing things the right way. The admission clearly cost her something in pride, but she continued with admirable directness. Seeing the joy Emma experienced yesterday at your community celebration made me realize I've been so focused on creating the perfect aesthetic experience that I nearly lost sight of what birthdays should actually celebrate: the pure happiness of the child and the love of those around them. We all lose perspective sometimes, I offered gently. Especially with first children, when the pressure to do everything perfectly feels so intense. Well, I'd like to do better going forward, she said with unexpected firmness. Starting with our family lunch next weekend. I'd really like your input on that. What simple traditions might be meaningful to include? What made birthdays special in your family? It was everything I had hoped for but never expected. Not just tolerance of my role in Emma's life, but active inclusion, a request for my perspective rather than a defensive rejection of anything I might offer. I would be honored to share those traditions, I told her, and equally interested in hearing what birthday elements were meaningful to you growing up, what you might want to preserve or reinvent from your own childhood. The conversation might have continued, but Emma had grown tired of being ignored and began emphatically requesting attention in the way only toddlers can, with increasing volume and determination. I really should go, I laughed, watching as she tugged insistently on Amber's silk robe. You have a busy day ahead, and this little one clearly has opinions about how the morning should proceed. Michael appeared from the kitchen to walk me out, Emma now contentedly settled on Amber's hip with the promised book finally being read. At the door, he embraced me warmly, the first such spontaneous show of affection in months. Thank you, Mom, for the gift. for understanding, for creating something beautiful yesterday that helped us see beyond our own perspectives. I love you, I said simply, and I love Emma. Everything else is details we can work through together. As I drove home, I reflected on the unexpected turns of the morning. What I had planned as a brief, invisible delivery had become a meaningful conversation, a first step toward healing the rift that had developed since Emma's birth. No, Amber and I would never approach celebrations or traditions exactly the same way. Our generational differences, personal histories, and individual preferences ensured that we would always bring different perspectives to family events. But perhaps that was exactly as it should be. Perhaps Emma would benefit from experiencing both approaches, the community-centered, tradition-honoring celebrations I valued alongside the aesthetically refined, contemporary gatherings her mother created. Different expressions of love, each valid in its own way. The week that followed brought several unexpected developments. First, a handwritten note from Amber arrived in my mailbox, thanking me for the framed photograph and expressing how touched she was by the thoughtfulness of leaving space for her picture with Emma. "I've already added our photo to complete the generations," she wrote. "It sits on Emma's bookshelf where she points to it daily, naming each of us in her own special way." Then came photographs from Michael, not professional shots from the official birthday party, but casual phone pictures he had taken himself. Emma in her party dress, eyes wide at her first sight of the elegant decorations. Emma being held by her mother while guests sang "Happy Birthday." Emma's face alight with discovery as she cautiously touched the small, sophisticated cake Amber had ordered specially for her. Most meaningful was a brief video clip of Emma opening my gift, assisted by Amber, who carefully explained who was in the photograph and helped Emma identify each person. "That's great, Grandma. Helen, that's Grandma Margaret. That's Mommy. And that's you, Emma." In the background, I could hear Michael adding, "4 generations of wonderful women in our family. Our family." Not just their nuclear unit, but the extended connections that gave Emma roots and context for her own developing identity. By the time Saturday arrived, the day of our promised family lunch, the tension I had carried for months had largely dissipated. I arrived at their home bearing a simple homemade cake, the recipe passed down from my grandmother, decorated with fresh strawberries rather than elaborate frosting. To my surprise, Amber had made efforts of her own toward bridging our different approaches. The dining table was set beautifully, her natural aesthetic still evident, but with unmistakable touches of whimsy and childish delight. A small banner reading "Happy Birthday, Emma" hung from the chandelier, clearly handmade rather than professionally produced. Small confetti sprinkles dotted the tablecloth in rainbow colors, a departure from her usual restrained palette. Most touching of all was a framed photograph I had never seen before. Michael at his first birthday, wearing the felt crown I had made, his face covered in chocolate cake as Charles and I laughed beside him. It sat on the sideboard alongside a new photograph from Emma's official party, creating a visual connection between past and present. I asked Michael to find some pictures from his childhood celebrations, Amber explained when she saw me notice. And I realized Emma should know these family stories, these connections to her father's childhood and her grandparents' traditions. The lunch itself was simple but lovely, a blend of Amber's sophisticated tastes and more child-friendly offerings. We ate together, sharing stories and laughter, Michael recounting memories of his own childhood birthdays while Amber spoke more openly than ever before about her own experiences growing up. When it came time for cake, Amber surprised me again. From a drawer, she produced the felt birthday crown I had saved for Emma, the same one Michael had worn in the photograph, the one I had mentioned during my early planning for Emma's birthday. "Michael found this when he was looking for those old photos," she said, holding it almost reverently. "He told me you made it for his first birthday, that all 3 of your children wore it for their early celebrations." "That's right," I confirmed, emotion tightening my throat. It's a simple thing, but it connected them to each other and to the family history. Amber carefully placed the slightly worn crown on Emma's dark curls, adjusting it to fit properly. I think it's beautiful. Not just the crown itself, but what it represents. Continuity. Family love extending through generations. As we sang Happy Birthday to Emma, a proper children's birthday song this time, not the sophisticated arrangement Amber had selected for the official party, I watched my granddaughter's face light up with simple joy. She clapped her hands in delight at our off-key singing, reached eagerly for the cake slice placed before her, and proceeded to make the glorious mess that is every one-year-old's right on their birthday. Later, as Emma napped off her sugar excitement and the three adults enjoyed coffee on the patio, Amber broached a subject I hadn't expected. "The community center called me yesterday," she said. "Apparently, the spring birthday celebration was such a success they want to make it a quarterly event, one for each season's birthdays. They asked if I would be interested in helping coordinate the summer edition, knowing my background in event planning and marketing." "What did you say?" I asked, genuinely curious about her response. "I said yes," she replied with a small smile. "But I also said I'd like to work alongside you, combining our different strengths and perspectives. If you're willing, of course." The offer represented more than simple event collaboration. It was an acknowledgement that our differences could be complementary rather than competitive, that we might create something richer together than either of us could produce alone. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I told her sincerely. "The children of Pinecrest will benefit from having both traditional elements and fresh contemporary approaches in their celebrations." As the afternoon light softened toward evening, I prepared to leave, my heart fuller than it had been in months. At the door, Emma reached for me from Michael's arms, offering a slightly sticky kiss and a toddler version of bye-bye that melted my heart completely. "Next Sunday dinner at your place?" Michael suggested, returning to the weekly tradition we had observed for years before tensions arose. "We can bring that wild rice salad Amber makes that everyone loves." "Perfect," I agreed, exchanging a warm glance with my daughter-in-law, who nodded her confirmation. Driving home in the gentle spring evening, I reflected on the journey of recent weeks. What had begun in hurt and rejection had transformed into something unexpected. Not just a restored relationship with my son's family, but a deeper understanding between two women from different generations, with different approaches to family and tradition. The community celebration that I had created partly from wounded pride had evolved into something meaningful for dozens of families, potentially becoming a new tradition that would continue enriching our town for years to come. The exclusion that had felt so painful had ultimately led to greater inclusion, not just for me and Emma's life, but for different perspectives within our family's approach to celebrations. Most importantly, Emma would grow up experiencing the best of both worlds, her mother's more modern aesthetic sensibilities and her grandmother's traditional community-centered approach. Not forced to choose between these influences, but enriched by both, connected to her family history while still fully embracing contemporary life. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed new spring flowers blooming in the garden Charles and I had planted decades earlier. Perennials that returned year after year, their familiar blossoms a comforting constant in the changing seasons of life. Alongside them grew newer additions I had planted more recently, different varieties that complemented the established blooms, creating a garden more vibrant and interesting than it had been before. A fitting metaphor, I thought, for family itself, honoring established roots while welcoming new growth, finding beauty in both tradition and innovation. Different generations bringing their unique gifts, creating something stronger and more resilient through their combination. The birthday that wasn't had become something far more valuable than a single celebration. It had become a bridge between past and future, between generations, between different ways of expressing the same fundamental truth. That family, in all its complex, evolving forms, remains our most precious gift to one another. 5 years have passed since that pivotal first birthday. Emma is now a lively 6-year-old with her father's curious mind and her mother's confident demeanor. She moves between our two worlds with remarkable ease, equally comfortable at sophisticated gallery openings with Amber and casual community picnics with me. The different influences in her life don't conflict, but complement one another, giving her a broader perspective than either Amber or I could have provided alone. Her birthday celebrations have evolved into something neither of us could have predicted during those tense early days. Each year now includes 3 distinct elements: the official family party that blends Amber's aesthetic sensibilities with more traditional touches, Emma's chosen outing with a few close friends, and her participation in the now-established seasonal birthday celebration at the community center. Not competing events, but complementary experiences that each honor different aspects of her growing identity. What began as a painful exclusion has transformed into an unexpected gift, not just for Emma, but for our entire family and community. Sometimes life's deepest hurts lead to our most meaningful growth, if we're willing to transform pain into purpose rather than resentment. The change didn't happen overnight. That first lunch after Emma's birthday was just the beginning, an opening, rather than a resolution. There were still uncomfortable moments, misunderstandings, and occasions when old tensions threatened to resurface. But with each interaction, the foundation grew stronger. Small compromises accumulated. Understanding deepened. Trust was gradually restored and expanded. 2 months after Emma's first birthday, Amber surprised me with an unexpected invitation. Would I be interested in helping her create a heritage cookbook for Emma? A collection of family recipes from both sides, with stories attached to each one, creating a bridge between generations and traditions. I realized, she explained as we sat at my kitchen table discussing the project, that I don't want Emma to grow up with the same gaps I had. I barely know anything about my own family's food traditions, because my mother was always focused on trendy cuisine that would impress guests rather than dishes that carried meaning. It was the first time she had voluntarily shared something so personal about her childhood, a gesture of trust that touched me deeply. I would love that, I told her, already mentally cataloging the handwritten recipe cards stored in my grandmother's wooden box. Food carries so much family history with it. The cookbook project became our first true collaboration, Amber bringing her design skills and organization, me contributing the stories and traditional techniques. We spent hours together in my kitchen, testing old recipes, adjusting ingredients for modern tastes, and documenting the process. Emma toddled around us, absorbing not just cooking skills but the sight of her mother and grandmother working harmoniously together. Michael watched this developing relationship with obvious relief. "You two are like some kind of unlikely buddy movie," he joked one evening as Amber and I debated the merits of various pie crust techniques. The Instagram-perfect millennial and the traditional grandma, solving culinary crimes together. We laughed, but his observation contained truth. Our different perspectives, once a source of tension, had become complementary strengths. Amber's eye for aesthetics improved my presentation. My experience with feeding generations of family informed her approach to nourishment. We were building something neither could have created alone. The community birthday celebrations continued to thrive, evolving from my initial project into a true partnership between generations. Amber gradually took on more responsibility, bringing her marketing expertise and event planning skills to what had begun as my modest community gathering. Under her guidance, what started as a simple celebration grew to include professional photographers offering free birthday portraits to families who couldn't afford them, themed activity stations designed by local artists, and corporate sponsorships that allowed us to provide small gift bags for each celebrated child. I might have worried that these additions would overshadow the simple, community-focused spirit of the original event. Instead, Amber showed remarkable sensitivity to maintaining the heart of the celebration while enhancing its reach and impact. The professional photographs weren't staged perfection, but joyful candids that captured authentic childhood delight. The corporate sponsorships came with strict conditions. No overt branding, no marketing pressure, just genuine community support. "I think I finally understand what celebrations should really be about," Amber told me after our fourth seasonal event, watching children of various ages playing together in the center's garden. Not impressions managed or appearances maintained, but genuine joy shared, connection emphasized over perfection. Our evolving partnership extended beyond the community center. When Michael's company transferred him to their international division for a 6-month assignment during Emma's preschool years, Amber made a decision that would have been unimaginable during those early tense months. "We'd like you to stay in our guest room 3 nights a week while Michael's overseas," she proposed, surprising me completely. "Emma does better with her routine when both of us are handling different days rather than me trying to do everything. And honestly, I could use the support." Those months of shared parenting responsibility, Amber managing the early weekdays with her work schedule, me taking the later portion of each week, deepened our relationship in ways neither of us had anticipated. The boundaries between her approach and my approach blurred as we both adapted to meet Emma's needs, creating a hybrid style that incorporated the best elements of our different generations. I learned to appreciate the benefits of some modern parenting techniques, the language development strategies that had given Emma her impressive vocabulary, the mindfulness exercises that helped her process difficult emotions. Amber began incorporating elements of my more traditional approach, the consistent routines, the emphasis on practical self-reliance, the simple family rituals that anchored each week. By the time Michael returned from his overseas assignment, something fundamental had shifted. We weren't competitors for Emma's affection or adversaries with opposing views on parenting. We had become true partners in raising a remarkable child, each contributing our unique strengths to create a more balanced whole. Emma benefited most from this transformation. Unlike many children caught between different generational approaches, she wasn't forced to navigate conflicting expectations or divided loyalties. Instead, she experienced the security of adults who respected one another, who modeled healthy communication and mutual adaptation. "You know what I like best about our family?" she asked me recently as we planted spring bulbs in my garden, a tradition we had established when she was barely old enough to hold a trowel. "That everybody listens to everybody else. At Zoe's house, her mom and grandma are always fighting about the right way to do things." Her simple observation captured what we had worked so hard to achieve. Not perfect agreement, but respectful. Collaboration. Not erasing our differences, but finding value in them. The seasonal birthday celebrations at the community center have now become one of Pinecrest's most beloved traditions. 4 times yearly, children born within that season gather for a simple, joyful recognition of their special days. Families of all backgrounds and means participate, knowing that every child will receive the same thoughtful attention regardless of their parents' resources or social connections. Last spring, as we celebrated the 5th anniversary of that first gathering, the mayor presented Amber and me with a community service award, recognizing the program's impact on local families. Standing together on the small stage, I was struck by how far we had come from those tense early days. From exclusion and hurt feelings to a genuine partnership that served not just our family, but our entire community. "We make a good team, don't we?" Amber whispered as we posed for photographs with the framed certificate. "The best," I agreed, thinking of all the unlikely circumstances that had brought us to this moment. If anyone had told me 5 years ago that being excluded from my grandchild's birthday would ultimately lead to one of the most meaningful collaborations of my life, I would have thought it impossible. Yet here we stood, the sophisticated daughter-in-law and the traditional grandmother, having created something neither of us could have accomplished alone. The following weekend brought Emma's 6th birthday, a celebration that perfectly embodied our joint evolution. The official party, held in Michael and Amber's backyard, featured Amber's signature elegant touches, beautiful decorations in Emma's favorite colors, thoughtfully designed activities, delicious food presented with artistic flair. But it also included elements that would have been unimaginable at that adults-only first birthday. Noisy games that prioritized children's laughter over adult comfort, the slightly lopsided cake Emma had helped me bake the day before, the traditional family birthday crown now adorned with additions from each passing year. Most meaningfully, the celebration included people from all parts of Emma's expanding world: school friends and their parents, neighbors of all ages, teachers from her various activities, and extended family from both sides. Not compartmentalized into modern connections and traditional relations, but welcomed as the diverse community that enriched her life. As I watched Emma surrounded by this multi-generational gathering, confidently blowing out her candles while wearing the family crown that had now graced 4 generations of birthdays, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey we had taken. The exclusion that had once caused so much pain had ultimately led to greater inclusion, not just for me and Emma's life, but for different perspectives within our approach to family celebrations. After the guests departed and Emma had been tucked into bed, exhausted from her big day, Amber, Michael, and I sat on their patio in the gentle spring evening, sharing a bottle of wine and quiet conversation. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Michael asked, looking between Amber and me. "If Mom had just accepted being excluded that first year, if she hadn't created the community celebration, if you hadn't taken Emma to participate in it, or if I had maintained my defensiveness instead of recognizing the value in Margaret's traditions," Amber added thoughtfully. "We might have settled into those separate camps forever. The old-fashioned grandmother, the modern parents, with Emma caught in between." "I think about it often," I acknowledged. "How sometimes the most painful moments can lead to the most beautiful outcomes, if we're willing to transform hurt into something constructive rather than destructive." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each reflecting on the unlikely path that had brought us to this harmonious present. "You know what I hope Emma takes from all this?" I finally said. "Not just the birthday traditions or the community connections, but the understanding that different doesn't mean wrong, that we can honor where we've come from while still embracing where we're going. That family isn't about perfect agreement, but about perfect acceptance of our differences." "To transformation," Amber proposed, raising her glass in a toast, "and to unlikely partnerships that make all our lives richer." As the 3 of us clinked glasses under the emerging stars, I thought about all the grandparents facing similar challenges with adult children and their partners. The changing expectations, the shifting family dynamics, the sometimes painful renegotiation of roles and relationships. I wished I could share with them what our journey had taught me. That sometimes exclusion can lead to greater inclusion if we respond with creativity rather than resentment. That traditions don't have to be abandoned to make room for innovation. They can be honored, adapted, and enriched by new perspectives. That the greatest gift we can offer the youngest generation isn't our perfect agreement, but our willingness to model respectful collaboration across our differences. And perhaps most importantly, that when we focus on what truly matters, the children we all love, the connections we all value, the future we all share, we often discover that our different approaches aren't competing alternatives but complementary strengths, each contributing something essential to the whole. 5 years ago, I stood in my kitchen feeling rejected and irrelevant, wondering if I would ever have a meaningful role in my grandchild's life. Today, I am not just included, but integral, not despite the differences between Amber's approach and mine, but because of the unique combination they create together. The birthday party I wasn't allowed to attend became the catalyst for a journey none of us could have predicted, a journey of growth, understanding, and ultimately, a deeper connection than rigid agreement could ever have produced. And for that unexpected gift, I am profoundly grateful. 10 years have passed since that fateful first birthday. Emma is now 11, a thoughtful preteen with her father's analytical mind, her mother's creative flair, and a remarkable ability to bridge different worlds that I like to think reflects my influence in her life. What began as a painful exclusion has blossomed into something none of us could have anticipated, a decade of growth, connection, and community impact that extends far beyond our immediate family. I'm sitting on my porch swing on a warm summer evening when Emma bikes up my driveway, her long legs pumping confidently as she navigates the slight incline. Unlike many of her peers who are glued to screens, Emma has maintained her love of outdoor activities, splitting her time between the competitive swimming Amber encourages and the gardening she enjoys with me. "Grandma!" she calls, propping her bike against the oak tree Charles planted the year Michael was born. "Did you hear? The Mayor's Youth Council approved our proposal." Emma bounds up the steps, all gangly limbs and excited energy, settling beside me on the swing with the easy familiarity of someone who has spent countless hours in this exact spot. Though she now divides her time between various activities and social commitments, our Tuesday afternoons and Saturday mornings remain sacred, times reserved for just the two of us, continuing traditions established in those early years after the community birthday celebration. "That's wonderful news," I tell her, genuinely excited, though not entirely surprised. Emma has inherited her mother's determination and organizational skills, along with a deep commitment to community service that both Amber and I have nurtured in different ways. "Mom says you inspired the whole thing," Emma continues, helping herself to the glass of lemonade I've prepared in anticipation of her arrival, "that I should thank you for planting the seed." The whole thing she refers to is the latest evolution of our seasonal birthday celebrations, a new program called Birthday Buddies that pairs older children with younger ones born in the same month, creating mentoring relationships centered around shared birthday celebrations and activities throughout the year. Emma had developed the concept for her Mayor's Youth Council project, combining Amber's networking savvy with my community building experience. "Your mother gives me too much credit," I demur, though the acknowledgement from Amber touches me deeply. Another sign of how far we've come. The seasonal celebrations were a community effort from the beginning, and this new program is entirely your vision. Emma gives me the skeptical look that reminds me so much of Michael at that age, the one that says she knows when adults are being modest about their contributions. "Mom showed me the scrapbook, Grandma. I know the whole story." The scrapbook she references was Amber's creation for Emma's 10th birthday, a beautifully designed chronicle of our family's journey from that tense first birthday to the present. With characteristic honesty, Amber had included the difficult beginning. Emma's birth announcement, a copy of the adults-only first birthday invitation, photographs from both the community celebration and the official party, and journal entries from various points along our path toward understanding. Rather than shield Emma from the early tensions, Amber had decided that the full story, conflicts, misunderstandings, and eventual growth, offered more valuable lessons than a sanitized version would. "She should know that meaningful relationships require work," Amber had explained when presenting the gift. "That people who love each other don't always get it right the first time, but can learn and grow together." Well, regardless of how it started, I tell Emma now, what matters is what you're creating now. Tell me more about how the program will work. For the next hour, she outlines her vision with impressive detail, how the birthday buddies will meet monthly, how the older children will be trained as mentors, how the community center will provide space and basic supplies, while local businesses have pledged support for special activities. At 11, she already shows the organizational capability Amber has honed in her corporate career, combined with the genuine care for others that I've tried to model throughout my life. And the best part, Emma concludes, her eyes bright with purpose, is that no kid will ever feel left out of birthday celebrations because their parents can't afford a party or don't have time to plan one. Everyone will have someone who makes their day special. Her words strike a chord deep within me, the beautiful, unexpected outcome of a painful experience transformed through creative response. What began with my exclusion from her first birthday has evolved, through years of intentional growth and collaboration, into Emma's passion for ensuring no child feels excluded from celebration and connection. Later that evening, as the 3 generations of us gather for dinner at Michael and Amber's home, a monthly tradition that has expanded to include James and his family, Rebecca when she's in town, and occasionally close friends who have become like family, I watch Emma sharing her youth council success with the assembled group. Across the table, Amber catches my eye with a knowing smile. "Full circle," she mouths silently, acknowledging what we both recognize, that the seeds planted in conflict have borne fruit neither of us could have imagined when we were locked in those early power struggles. The evolution of our relationship didn't happen overnight. After that first community celebration and the tentative reconciliation that followed, we experienced plenty of setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, when miscommunications led to hurt feelings, when the fundamental differences in our approaches to life created friction. What changed wasn't the existence of these differences, but our response to them. Rather than viewing our distinct perspectives as competing alternatives, we gradually learned to see them as complementary strengths, each providing something essential that the other lacked. The cookbook project I mentioned earlier became our first true collaboration, but many others followed. When Amber decided to launch her own marketing consultancy after years in corporate life, she asked for my insight on building community connections in Pinecrest. When I considered stepping down from leading the senior computer literacy program at the community center, she helped me develop a succession plan that preserved the program's heart while updating its approach for changing technology. "We're like counterweights," Amber observed during a rare evening when just the 2 of us were sorting through decorations for the community center's anniversary celebration. "I keep you from getting too stuck in how things have always been. Done? And you keep me grounded when I get carried away with the latest trend." She was right. Our differences, once a source of tension, had become our greatest strength as a family unit, providing Emma with the security of time-tested wisdom and the excitement of innovation, the rootedness of tradition and the adaptability of contemporary thinking. The community birthday celebrations continued evolving as well. What began as my response to personal hurt became a genuine community institution, expanding to serve more children and families each year. We added elements reflecting Amber's expertise, professional photographs for families who couldn't afford them, more sophisticated activity stations designed by local artists, corporate sponsorships that enabled us to provide small gift bags for each celebrated child. Yet we maintained the heart of the original concept, the birthday circle where each child was recognized individually, the handmade flower crowns created by senior volunteers, the emphasis on community connection over material excess, the perfect blend of traditional meaning and contemporary execution, just as Amber and I had achieved in our relationship. 7 years into our journey, something remarkable happened that truly demonstrated how far we had come. Amber's parents, who had remained distant figures in Emma's life despite our efforts to include them, faced a health crisis that required them to relocate closer to family. After much discussion, Michael and Amber made an unexpected decision. They would convert their detached garage into a comfortable apartment for Amber's father and stepmother. "They need family support," Amber explained when sharing their plans. "And Emma deserves to know her grandparents on both sides, even though the relationship has been complicated." The renovation process revealed yet another dimension of our evolved relationship. Amber's parents, products of their own generation and experiences, had a formal, emotionally distant approach to family life that had shaped Amber's childhood in ways she was still processing. As they settled into the garage apartment, their discomfort with casual family interaction and intergenerational activities became apparent. "Now I understand so much more about your perspective," Amber told me one afternoon as we watched her. Parents maintain a careful distance from the boisterous family dinner unfolding in the backyard. Why you fought so hard to maintain Emma's connection to family traditions. Why the birthday exclusion felt so devastating. "And I understand more about your journey," I replied, seeing clearly how Amber's early resistance to traditional family celebrations had been shaped by her own childhood experiences, how you've had to create your own path without the models I took for granted. This newfound understanding deepened our partnership. Together, we developed strategies to gently include Amber's parents in family life without overwhelming them, creating smaller interactions, finding connection points through shared interests, gradually building the relationships that had been missing throughout Amber's childhood. "You're the grandmother I wish I'd had," Amber confided during a rare, vulnerable moment as we prepared for one of the seasonal birthday celebrations. "And the mother-in-law I never expected." The community impact of our collaboration extended beyond the birthday celebrations. 3 years ago, the Pinecrest Community Center approached us about developing a broader intergenerational program, recognizing how effectively we had bridged the gap between traditional and contemporary approaches. The resulting initiative, Generation Bridges, now includes cooking classes where seniors share family recipes, while younger participants introduce modern techniques, technology exchanges where teens help older adults navigate digital tools, while learning about pre-digital communication methods, and oral history projects that preserve community stories through modern media. Emma, naturally, has been at the center of these efforts, absorbing the lesson that different generations have valuable contributions to make, that wisdom flows in multiple directions when we remain open to learning from each other. As our family dinner concludes and we move to the backyard for dessert, under the stars, I find myself sitting between Amber's father, still somewhat formal, but gradually warming to our family's more demonstrative style, and James's teenage son, who is showing me his latest coding project on a tablet. The scene captures perfectly what we've created together, a family that spans generations and perspectives, that honors differences rather than demanding uniformity, that has transformed potential division into remarkable strength. Later, as Michael walks me to my car, he pauses in the driveway, looking back at the house glowing with light and life. "You know, Mom, I was thinking about Emma's Birthday Buddies program, about how it all started with that first birthday conflict. It's amazing how something that seems so negative at the time has led to so much good. Life's like that sometimes," I tell him, thinking of other difficult chapters that eventually yielded unexpected gifts. The painful loss of Charles that led me to deeper community involvement, career setbacks that opened doors to more meaningful work, relationships that required conflict before reaching genuine understanding. The question isn't whether we'll face challenges, but what we'll create from them. As I drive the short distance home, I reflect on the journey of the past decade, from the hurt of exclusion to the joy of co-creation, from competing approaches to complementary strengths, from misunderstanding to deep appreciation of our differences. The truth is, Amber and I will never be identical in our approaches to family, traditions, or celebrations. She still values aesthetics and innovation in ways I find occasionally excessive. I still prioritize simplicity and tradition in ways she sometimes finds limiting. But we've learned that our differences don't have to divide us, that Emma benefits from experiencing both perspectives, that our family is stronger because of our distinct contributions, that our community is enriched by the programs we've created together. If I could share one message with other grandparents navigating the complex terrain of modern family relationships, it would be this. The goal isn't to make others see things your way, but to find the gifts within your different perspectives. Not to win the battle for influence, but to create a new approach that honors multiple viewpoints. Not to preserve traditions exactly as they've always been, but to capture their essential purpose in forms that can evolve with changing times. Had I simply accepted my exclusion from Emma's first birthday with quiet resentment, or fought aggressively for my right to attend, I might have won a small victory but lost the opportunity for deeper understanding. By channeling my hurt into creative community action instead, I opened a door that eventually led to genuine reconciliation and collaboration, not just for my benefit, but for Emma's, for Amber's, and for countless children in our community. 10. Years later, I can see clearly that what initially felt like rejection became an invitation to growth, a painful but necessary catalyst for creating something far more valuable than I could have imagined. The birthday party I wasn't allowed to attend set in motion a decade of transformation, connection, and community impact that continues to ripple outward in ways none of us could have predicted. Some might call it making the best of a bad situation. I prefer to think of it as the alchemy that turns hurt into healing, division into unity, exclusion into expansive inclusion. The magic that happens when we respond to life's challenges not by demanding our way, but by creating a new way that serves a greater purpose than our original plans ever could. As I pull into my driveway, I notice Emma has left her latest art project on my porch, a handmade sign for the upcoming Birthday Buddies kickoff event. The design seamlessly blends elements that reflect both her mother's contemporary aesthetic and my more traditional sensibilities, creating something uniquely hers that honors both influences without being limited by either. A perfect symbol, I think, of the gift we've given her by transforming our early conflicts into creative collaboration, the freedom to integrate different perspectives, to build bridges across generational differences, to create something new that honors what came before, while embracing what lies ahead. And in the end, isn't that the most meaningful legacy any of us can hope to leave? Not rigid adherence to how things have always been done, but the wisdom to preserve what matters most while adapting to changing times. Not the elimination of differences, but the celebration of how those very differences, when approached with openness and respect, create families and communities of remarkable resilience, creativity, and love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.